Again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being here. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping pieces to work through. If you can see the chat thread, there is a note there. I dropped a note in there. This meeting is being recorded, and this will get posted at a later date after we most likely through a YouTube link. And so folks that couldn't make these meetings can tune in and watch this if they so desire. We are asking attendees to send questions to the email in the chat thread, the letter J, Larner at MadawanSchools.org. And if you have tuned in at other broadcasts, typically my secretary is receiving emails. She was unable to make it tonight. And so Mr. Larner is pinch hitting on the emails. And what we're doing is sending those through email allows for privacy. And we are dropping those on our end into a Google document that all of the panelists are looking at. So when we get to a Q&A, the Q&A session, we're all seeing the questions, and we're also going to use that document to publish a frequently asked questions document. And as soon as, I would imagine hopefully by Monday, Tuesday, we will have these FAQs out on all of the sessions. And you'll receive a communication when that comes out, that documentation. So we do appreciate your help there. Again, that email is the letter J, Larner, that's Larn as in Nancy, ER, at MadawanSchools.org, and that email is in the chat thread. Okay, so before we do introductions, brief introductions, just a couple housekeeping pieces besides questions. Actually, I apologize, we already did those. On the recording and posting and whatnot. Let's get right into introductions. We do have our tech director here. Tony is here tonight. Tony, I'm just going to acknowledge that you're online as the host. He is kind of manning the technology side, again, pinch hitting for Ashley. And then we have Mr. Chip Schumann. Chip, why don't you go ahead and say hi?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Chip Schumann, and I'm the principal here at Madawan Middle School, entering my 14th year. I just added it up this evening, so I think I have the official number, but glad to be here. Been a longtime resident of Madawan, and both my kids have graduated from Madawan. So thanks for having me. True pleasure. So thank you, Randy, also.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks, Chip. Thanks for being here tonight. And Mr. Larner, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Excited to be part of the Madawan School District. Different from Chip, I'm in my 12th day. So, working my way into the district and getting to know folks. Really appreciative for all the attendees this evening. Great participation at all of the town hall meetings. And hopefully we'll be able to clarify and answer all of our questions this evening, and just appreciate all the feedback that we've received in kind of preparation for our return to learn plan. So appreciate everyone being a part of tonight's discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. My name is Randy, new superintendent here. I've been on the job since July 1 and would echo the sentiments. Thanks for your time, and just really enjoying the staff and people, parents, and community members here. So the thought for tonight, the process here is that we do have two documents we want to work through. And one is an overview document. Actually, they're both overview documents. One just kind of is an overview of the plan with the timeline from August 24 to about mid-October. And we're going to walk through the several different stages in our return to learn plan. And then the second document is a much more detailed snapshot of the remote plan at the middle school. So tonight we're just focusing on the remote start. We're going to provide detail through the different stages, which would include hybrid and some various face-to-face pieces. But we know there are a lot of questions about the remote start. What is it looking like, and so forth. So we will be getting into much more detail on the remote plan at the middle school. And just keep in mind, this is in regards to phase 4. And we had to submit a plan to the state with our preparedness and response for all phases. But we are currently in phase 4 in our area and state of the state. And so tonight's really going to focus on how we're responding in a phase 4. There probably will be anecdotal information about phase 3, but not much tonight. So I'm going to screen share, and that often reformats, maybe we'll reformat your end, what you're seeing. So bear with me here. We're going to get ready for a little bit of a change. So you should be seeing here populating a screen that has a blue document with some arrows. Jay, are you seeing that on your end?
Yes, yeah, it's up.
So, so we're going to start with this document. Now, I do want to clarify, there was an overview, return to learning plan overview document that was sent out last week that had a graphic on it. This graphic looks different. The content is pretty much the same. But what you're seeing is a document that summarizes that overview. That overview is about 12 or 13 pages. This document is 3 pages and just deals specifically with the remote portions of that overview. And so tonight we're just going to work through this timeline quickly and answer questions as we go. Now, if you have questions, again, drop them into the email, start sending them to Mr. Larner. We're going to get to a Q&A at the end, but we're also going to try to answer questions as we go that have already been coming in. And so you might drop a question in right now and hear the answer later. That's okay. We'll still work through these questions. So as you can see on this document, August 17 through 21 is really our last call for when we want to have technology out. Technology has already begun being distributed. We did send a survey out last week to parents requesting that they reach out if there are technology needs in the home. We are providing devices and Wi-Fi connection, and a lot of questions about, how do you qualify for that? And really the qualification is if you reply that you have a need, you are qualifying. And then we are going to work to get you the device, the connectivity that you need. We are asking families, though, if they have devices at home to satisfy, the remote plan, or they have reliable internet or accessible internet at home, that they pass on the district technology if at all possible. But clearly, if that need is there, it's just merely reaching out. Later on the next slide, there's some contact information that we'll go through, but there also was a survey that was sent out. So, so that process has already started. We know many students already have devices from the spring. That's fantastic, but we do want to make sure we're getting devices out. Let's jump into August 24 through September 18. And just for the sake of conversation tonight, we're going to talk about each one of these target dates that you're seeing, and just we're planning on these rolling out in real time according to these dates. So that's how we're going to present it tonight. So our August 24th is our start date. It is a full remote start for all students. So all students will be engaging in online remote learning. There will be no general on-site instruction happening in stage A. And again, before let me stop myself here. I need to define a couple terms. You're going to see phase in this document, and you're going to see stage. And phase is the Michigan Roadmap to Safe Schools categorization. There are 6 phases. We're currently in phase 4 that is set by the state. Stage is a Mattawan term. So we have developed 3 stages in phase 4 that we're talking through tonight. So whenever you hear stage, that's our term. When you hear phase, that's the state level term. So in a stage A under phase 4, it is full remote. Oop, my apologies. So we're going to look at a couple pieces here of just highlights for this. We'll get into a little bit more detail later. All students start full remote. Instruction is Monday through Friday. We do have a structured schedule we're following. We'll get into that in a little bit. And when we say a school bell schedule, we're modeling this online learning around a traditional day, and we'll explain more about that later. But there are target dates to make decisions in each one of these stages, and let me talk briefly about that in a second after these bullet points. So in a full remote, that is a Mattawan-driven program. We are using Mattawan curriculum. It is taught by Mattawan teachers and supported by Mattawan support staff. We talked about it being a structured learning day. We are setting standards for attendance and monitoring of such, but I would also add flexibility is the name of the game here. We want to, based on the feedback from the spring, from staff and parents, we wanted a bit of an enhancement on the day, the structure. And part of that is, we want to assist families in encouraging their children by setting standards of routines, right? There's a rhythm here to online school. We're getting up, we're getting ready, we're engaging in class. There's offline work time. We're engaging in class. There's these structures that we see in a normal day. But to the parents and guardians out there, flexibility is also the name of the game. So when you see attendance will be taken or monitored, we're presenting that front. We want to show the importance of that, but we're also telling families, listen, life happens just like in traditional school, and we're going to work with you. And so we're going to get into some of the pieces on how we're going to support families offline here in a little bit, but lots of questions about, is there going to be live face-to-face instruction? Yes. Are the lessons going to be recorded? Yes. Can students access those lessons at a later time? For the most part, yes. It might vary by grade level a little bit. When you get outside of middle school with very young children, just the amount being recorded and pushed out could vary. But the primary delivery method here is live face-to-face instruction. Adherence to IEPs and 504s plans along with tiered support. That is part of the remote plan. Our teams are busy putting together schedules and already connecting with families that have students that are on an IEP or on a 504 plan or have received tier instruction. And so if you are a parent or guardian online tonight here and you're in this category, you are on a call list and you will be getting contacted. And so for every stage, we will be working to meet goals and objectives in these support plans. Access to food service will be available through all stages all year. And in a remote stage, though, parents will most likely have to come and pick up food that will probably be grouped by days instead of a single meal, so we can help limit the amount of trips to school. If you look back up into this box, you've got a stage B decided by September 4th. So let me talk about this target date. And when I get through all of this staging, I will talk briefly about the rationale on the dates and just some questions that have come up over that. But for the sake of conversation, we're at September 4th. We've made a decision. We're green lighting stage B. Stage B then commences on the 21st. So you'll see a pattern. There is a decision target, and then there's an execution target. And there's a gap of time between each of those. And that is to give folks time to prepare. Families to prepare at home for the upcoming stage, teachers to prepare, and just put some flexibility in there. But let's go ahead and move into stage B. And this is a hybrid stage. Now, this looks, there's a lot of different models floating around. out in the various counties when you hear hybrid. But for the purposes of tonight, this is kind of our guiding conversational points. So young 5th through 5th grade in stage B hybrid will be on site 1 to 2 full days per week. The same for middle school, high school, or secondary, 1 to 2 full days per week. And let me work through those bullet points, and then I'm going to double back and talk about some rationale and some of the challenges we're facing right now on working through deciding the details on stage B. So this essentially is a schedule will be determined. Students will be in person on site a set amount of days, and then they'll be at remote learning off site at home the remainder of the days. Again, MC Mattawan curriculum, Mattawan staff and teachers. At this stage, because there's going to be more students in the buildings, there'll be an uptick in implemented safety and protocols, cleaning protocols, and so forth. And this is a point in the plan where we focus on trying to cohort kids as much as possible. So that merely means we're going to do our best to keep groups of kids together throughout the day. This is a recommendation from health departments and probably the CDC that it helps limit a potential transfer of the virus and cross-contamination. Now, candidly, it is probably easier to accomplish in elementary schools. As the kids get older, it becomes much more difficult to do cohorting. Some schools are they're doing grouping like an A group, B group, and they're alternating half the student body in on several days, and then they're cohorting by A and B. Teachers might be rotating instead of students rotating. I mean, there's all kinds of ideas floating around there. And if you search other schools in Van Buren and Kalamazoo, you're going to see that there are many different kind of hybrid models. Where we're struggling right now, and we have not decided how that hybrid is going to look. We are committing to families that we will have the details of stage B worked out by the end of this coming week. So a week from this Friday, we want to have the bones of this plan established. And that would be deciding, are students coming on for full days or half days? What days, how many days are they coming on? Are all the students coming on those days, or are we grouping students, segmenting the population of kids coming in? And so there's a lot of factors in there, and I know there may be folks on the line tonight that wanted clarification on the hybrid model. We just don't have the detail right now, but we are committing to having that worked out by a week from this Friday. There's a lot of different logistical things to consider, and I know we're not the only school that struggled with determining that hybrid. And then there's a host of different requirements and strongly recommended pieces that come into play when you bring kids back face to face. Food service will be available, like I said, in all stages, but let's pretend it's October 2nd. The decision is made to move to what we call stage C, and the 19th rolls around and we're in stage C. And again, the word up here, full, this means our implementation plan is fully realized at stage C. And some of the details here is that's a Monday through Thursday, full day in person, all kids, elementary, reporting for instruction. 6 through 12, again, you're going to see some variation here because we haven't quite worked out the days yet. 2 to 4 full days in person of instruction. Off-site days are remote learning. So let's just hypothetically assume by stage C, we are 4 full days on-site K-12. What we're saying, there's been a lot of question about at the elementary, that 5th day, why are we not on campus 5 full days? And we didn't quite get to answering that this morning. Our internet went out and phones went out at about an hour and 15 in, and we just couldn't reconnect. So I want to make sure I get this answer out there. We're saving that 5th day for unforeseen cleaning requirements, what we might call super deep cleaning that may be needed. There is a possibility we may not need that. We may go into a 5 full day scenario. Again, but we want to communicate this and decide it by October 2nd. If you look at a lot of hybrid plans in other schools, many are doing only 4 days of in-person, either a Wednesday off or a Friday off of remote learning. And what's happening in that off day is teacher planning and serious deep cleaning that might involve, moving furniture and equipment and so forth. So that's the rationale on that day. In the overview document that was sent out a week or so ago, there was a statement in there that said we would not consider a 5-day, full day on-site program until we were in phase 5. And I would say that statement is still standing right now, but clearly if things are improving and we feel like that should be considered and we're still in stage 4, we would want to give parents plenty of advance notice. A couple pieces here in the bullets under stage C. Actually, I don't believe anything's changed other than the days on site. I do want to mention that cleaning and safety protocols are in play in stage A. I didn't mention that, and I need to add that to the bullet list. But we will have staff in the buildings, and during stage A, the vast majority of staff will be instructing and running the remote learning programs from the buildings, most likely their classrooms. There may be some exceptions to that, but that was a pretty clear desire by staff to want to be at school in the buildings during the remote portion. There were a lot of questions when the overview plan came out about where did these dates come from? And are they legitimate? Is the school just stalling, delaying? Are their intentions about returning to face-to-face real? And I understand where those questions are coming from. These are legitimate dates. These dates were discussed at great length. And we have every intention of sticking to these targeted deadlines. So let me give you a little more background on that. The plan that you're seeing, the overview document, the details that will be released this week for each building have been reviewed and discussed initially by our Return to Learning Task Force and more thoroughly by individual building staff. So when I say task force, that's about a group of 42 individuals, teachers from all grade levels, social worker representation, special education representation, food service, transportation, building and grounds, administration, deans of teaching and learning, principals, central office staff make up this task force. So a lot of the decisions you're seeing were developed by this task force. There was a clear desire to get to face-to-face in a reasonable, safe way. And what you're seeing here from stage A to C is essentially an 8-week turnaround. The task force felt very strongly that that was the outer marker of time. We talked about 6 weeks. We talked about 4 weeks. We talked about 2 weeks. A lot of schools now this week and the end of last week have abandoned face-to-face and gone to 2-4 weeks or a hybrid or a half day on. There's just a lot of flex happening in some of our schools. And we felt it was important to get to face-to-face in a reasonable amount of time, fully realized by this calendar in 8 weeks, partially realized in 2 to 3. if you look at that mid-September, actually 3 to 4. So, and why the 8 weeks, why the 2-week increments? I did talk a little bit about the decision, the time to plan, the decision to move to a new stage, time to plan. We did feel like a marking period or a trimester, semester was too long. Some schools have gone by 9-week increments. Some schools have gone by trimesters through their stages of onboarding. But we felt the 8 weeks was appropriate, and we have every intention on hitting those targets. Lots of questions about the criteria to determine stage movement. In the lower left corner, you see a box here, and this contains 3 items. 2 of these are objective and 1 is subjective. So our objective items that we're looking at as criteria would be, what phase are we in? The Michigan phase that's set by the state. And then locally, what risk category are we in, and what are the local numbers as determined by our health departments? And the risk level is established, and cases and recovery rates are charted by our local health departments. So right now we're at a moderate high or medium high risk level, and there I've received a lot of feedback from families about questioning the medical data, arguing 6 foot versus 3 feet or 4 feet, the Pediatrics Association versus CDC versus the task force, governor's task force recommendations. And I absolutely am trying to stay abreast of all of this and read this information as folks are sending it to me, and that I'm searching out on my own. But the reality is we're not, as a school, going to debate the legitimacy of information that these medical organizations are putting out. We're going by what phase are we in, and what are things looking like on the ground according to our local health departments. And then the building safety considerations is your subjective piece. That is input locally. And when I say locally, I mean buildings, staff, families. What's the word we're hearing out there? And we understand that it has got a subjective, current to it, because it's taking into account how people are perceiving what's happening, how they're feeling about it. But that is important to take into consideration. When we think about what could derail this timeline, if we move to a phase 3, that will derail parts of this timeline, because phase 3, according to the state, does not allow any on-site instruction. So what else could maybe derail this timeline? If we see the risk category increase, if we see by county an uptick in cases, or we're receiving information from the health department, indicating concern or so forth, then that could cause the timeline to be adjusted. But other than that, we are looking forward to working through this timeline, hitting these target dates, and moving forward through the stages. Absolutely. One more comment, then I'm going to hit the pause button, and Jay or Chip might want to chime in, or we'll move to the next slide. There were quite a few questions that came in regards to parents, community feeling that the district was ignoring the survey data that clearly did indicate the majority of our families want face-to-face. And in that communication where we went over some of the survey data, the summary points, that there was an indication in staff data that the majority of staff were interested in a remote start. And so, I want to address that by saying, we painstakingly went through all of that survey data. The task force reviewed that survey data, and we did take that into consideration. And what you're seeing in this plan, we feel, is a reasonable, safe approach to getting as quickly to face-to-face as possible. Yes, it is not perfect. I don't believe any plan out there is. Yes, we are not starting out of the gate in face-to-face. We realize that that's obviously clear from the plan, but we're not disregarding parents' desires. We're merely putting more space down to get to that. And I know this is causing hardship for families, and that there are families that did not agree with this, and we hear you and understand that. But I did want to at least say we are looking at this data. We did take that into consideration. And again, it came back as this was a reasonable, safe approach, but a fairly aggressive timeline to get to a face-to-face model. I'm going to hit the pause button right now. Jay or Chip, anything to chime in on this? Otherwise, we'll jump into the details.
No, I'm not for me. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder, if you do have questions, please submit them to my email at jlarner@madawanschools.org. We are collecting them, and we'll as we get them in, we're adding them to our document in preparation for the FAQ, and we'll be answering a lot of these questions towards the end, because we'll compile common questions together. So.
Thanks, Jay. This next slide, everybody, that you're looking at is a little more kind of meat on the bone for the remote portion of the return to learn. Clearly, in the slide before, there was a hybrid. There was a stage B and C. Those details are also being developed, but for this evening's sake, we wanted to focus on the remote start because that is the first stage we're approaching. Some of the details here, you'll notice 5 core categories: curriculum and instruction, communication, health, wellness, food service, resources, technology, and then a sample draft schedule. And when I get to the schedule, I will enlarge that because I know some of you might be looking at that and maybe can't see it very clearly. So some of the highlights for curriculum and instruction, some of these we've already talked about on the previous slide, but we are talking about full-time, 5-day full-time 5-day remote instruction, our teachers, our support staff, our curriculum, and again, a structured learning day. You can see this schedule, and we'll kind of get into there and beat that schedule up a little bit in a couple minutes. Teachers instructing from classrooms, again, exceptions may apply here depending on situations, but some of the key takeaways here is that we want synchronous learning to be the primary driver. So that is our online face-to-face, kind of what we're doing right now. This is synchronous. Asynchronous is non-live or offline opportunities, engagement in learning. And so you're going to see a varying degree of these opportunities throughout the schedule. And that is by design. In the spring survey, it was very clear that more online opportunities to connect live with staff was desired by families and actually by staff. So hopefully you're going to see that kind of resonate in what we're working through tonight. Encore classes available, and Chip will probably talk more about that in the schedule in a minute. Assessments of student work will happen. Grading will follow the traditional grading format and system at the middle school. We're looking to set up avenues for regular feedback, virtually, face-to-face, digitally, through multiple platforms of correspondence. And again, in this model, adherence to IEPs and 504 plans and goals. And then that last bullet, looking at developing, and this is still in the works, interventions and supports available after September 4. And so we know for a variety of reasons that students in a traditional format, pre-COVID, we're receiving supports in a variety of areas. So we're looking on how can we get creative to support families and students in this manner in a remote setting, or even in a hybrid, actually through all the stages. So that will be part of the structure as well. Communication is very important. We know it needs to be open, it needs to be quick, it needs to be efficient, and we're going to do our best to stick to a 24-hour return rule. Typically we would ask teachers, 2 business days, get back with families within 48 hours. We know often in this setting, time is of the essence, but definitely our administration and tech team will probably be beating that rule. And I would imagine our tech department will probably be pretty quick to respond, because we know that if there are tech issues in a remote setting, that means loss of engagement. So our tech department is ready. They're already engaging and getting devices handed out and organizing all of that. So other platforms for communication that we're working on, and you'll see that in the schedule. You've got instruction, your core instruction happening to about 12:20, and the afternoon blocks at all of the schools, teachers, support staff will be available, but this is a bit more of a flex time, and Chip will probably fill that block in. But this would be a time where some conferencing can happen, some one-on-one instruction, maybe some support can happen digitally with our para teams and so forth. But the thought there is we want to be available and accessible, especially in those afternoon blocks. Virtual conferencing, Google Classroom, Google Hangout, Zoom meetings, and so forth, as ways to communicate. Some reminders on health, wellness, and resources in this plan. Wellness check-ins as needed. Our social work team, special education department, guidance departments are all busy, already making phone calls, getting ready for the start of the year, and we'll continue that in a cyclical manner through all of the stages. One last note, and then we'll get into the schedule. Up on the right corner, we've got technology. Google Classroom is the platform that will be utilized by teachers at the middle school, at the high school, at the later elementary. The only difference there is that early elementary will be utilizing a program called Seesaw. And then here are the technology contacts I talked about earlier. There is that slide that's out there, or that survey rather, that is out there, but you can also email or call the tech department if you have questions about technology or technology needs. Just, a note here that a device and internet is needed, obviously, for remote learning, and then a reminder about the district providing those to families that need it. Just briefly, that schedule, let me blow that up a little bit here. That'd be a little bit easier to see. So this is a representation of, structured times of engagement. And again, you can see that we want to model a schedule, bell to bell, the best we can to get kids in the routine, getting up, engaging, and then having asynchronous time in the afternoon or one-on-one time with teachers or para staff to continue learning as needed. I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask Chip Schumann to jump in. Chip, maybe just talk a little bit about the schedule, or maybe you're looking at some questions there that are around the schedule, but let's get into some of those.
Okay. Yeah. So as you can see, the schedule is constructed around 35-minute class periods, with encore classes being somewhere around 25 to 30 minutes. But we are often asked, or we've been asked earlier, I'll say that about encores. We do want to keep encores in our students' day. Those are some really important things that I know that a lot of them look forward to. As we talk about band, I know band and choir, people ask quite often about band and choir, and we really want to keep those programs strong and moving forward. We have so many students that enjoy those experiences, and clearly we're tonight talking about remote, but as we move into our hybrid or our next stages, we're going to have to talk about safety procedures and things like that. But we want to keep all of those classes intact because so many kids enjoy them. I'm asked that often. Of our cores also throughout the day. In a time, there's a little bit of time in between each. Having a little bit shorter encores gives the kids a little bit more time also to kind of stretch and get away from their computer and take care of their personal needs and all that kind of stuff. And then with a time in the afternoon to catch lunch. And then as Randy had said, having staff, different staff members, whether support or teachers, available in the afternoon to support student learning from there. Maybe, as we said, answering questions or providing support for work that they did in the morning to help them out further throughout their day. Also say a couple other things that came up earlier. One revolved around supplies, school supplies. That's a question every single year, regardless of what format we're in. And I have found over the years of doing this job, it's really best to tell people that right now, it's always safe to get general school supplies, such as, what we think of paper, pencils, pens, and the things that they like to use, markers or colored pencils and such. Specific items. Some teachers may want 3-ring binders and things like that, but as we've done school list supply lists in the past, I just don't want to. I want to make sure they're going to get utilized, rather than people purchasing things and they don't get used, like the teacher might hope or the parents might hope. So that's a question we're often asked. We've been asked too about kind of trying to group kids by neighbors and neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. And at the secondary level, that gets much more complex also because of all of the things that we have to consider in deciding where students are placed and how they're placed. But I will say, so doing that is really difficult and in some cases undoable in some ways. But I am asking teachers, regardless of the team. So example, if it's a 6th grade math, that the 6th grade math teachers are planning and working together so that those lessons closely align, so that if they are working with someone from another team, that it's a very similar experience with very similar lessons, so that can be accomplished. So I'm working with teachers to make sure that we're doing that the very, very best we can. Again, there's a little bit of style difference between teachers because that's just who they are. But as far as the delivery of instruction and the pace and the lessons, I want those to be as closely aligned as we possibly can to help families out with that. Another question that came up a little earlier is about textbook distribution and such. I'm really trying super hard not to inconvenience parents as much as possible. So I'm looking to at least start the year as we start in this remote platform, that teachers make copies and post things to their Google Classroom, so we don't have to inconvenience parents of coming in and getting textbooks and such. And we don't have a tremendous amount of textbooks in the middle school, given how we deliver instruction. But in those areas that we do, I'm going to try to do that. And then as we move into that hybrid phase, then we can look to check out books to students as they come to school. And then anyone that's remaining in that remote learning, then we can look to help them out and check those out for them on the future. But I'm wanting teachers the best we can to post all those materials to their Google Classroom so kids can access them that way, and we're not exchanging books and such. Also in lines with the books, our district has a program that's free to families called Overdrive, and I'm going to ask our media specialist to put together some information so you can learn how you can access some reading materials through that program. It's kind of like an online library, basically, where we've certain books that would be in our library. We don't have an unlimited supply, but we do have some. And then we're also going to be talking about if classroom novels are needed or independent reading is happening, how we're going to access the library books also. So we'll be sharing information about that as well. So those are just a few of the things that I'm recalling that we talked about earlier today, and addressing some of the questions that came to us this evening as well. So I'll turn it back over to Randy, and then.
No, Chip, you're on a roll. You're on a roll. Let me feed you some questions.
Okay.
There are quite a few questions, I think, from sixth grade families, and you're doing great.
Yeah. Okay.
About the open house, and I think this is, they're coming from a different building.
Yeah.
This is kind of a big transition year.
Yeah.
Specifically, sixth grade has been referenced, but could you talk a little bit about what's brewing in the middle school there to maybe connect with these kids?
I just met with teachers yesterday and presented the challenge of that. Actually, clearly we're trying to avoid the congregating in groups and so on and so forth. So I've talked to teachers about some way that we can be creative and do some kind of virtual introductions to students so they can at least see their teachers and who they are. And so we're still working through some of those details, but we're certainly sensitive to it. And I've always told our sixth grade parents that one of the things we realize is what a big transition this is. And I am just, I want to say how sorry I am that this is the way we're meeting each other, because that's clearly not the way we want to do it, for sure. And so we're going to try to be as creative as we can. And I've talked to all of our teachers, regardless of what grade, because even some of our other grades, we might have new students to Madawan, and we want everyone to feel comfortable regardless of what grade they're in. So really challenging all of our staff to be looking at how we can be creative to introduce ourselves to our students and how we can get to know each one of them as well. So it won't look like it did before or in the past, but it's not something that we are just dismissing, or are we looking just to jump right into learning? Because obviously we have to work through some of our technology issues and some of those bumps, but that relationship building and that connection with the teacher are super important. So we are going to continue to work on that.
Great. Thanks, Chip. I'll give you a break. Let me take a couple questions that are coming in, and we appreciate all these being submitted. We're going to work quickly and efficiently through as many as possible here. Those that joined after the intro, we will be posting the video of this meeting online. We will also be posting answers to the questions submitted in a frequently asked questions document. So a question about if on stage A, September 4th, the decision about moving to stage B is made. If it is a no, what do we do then, or what happens then? And we would, at this point, stick to those 2-week cycles. So we would revisit that probably at September 21st, I think was the next day or the next cycle deadline. So we haven't necessarily talked about that administratively, but we do want to stick to a cycle and not just let these things go on indefinitely. We think the deadlines are important, and we think it's important for planning and to have those targets out there to keep moving the ball down the field, so to speak. Question on, I maybe already addressed this, criteria being used to evaluate the movement, and will the data be communicated to families? I would say yes. The criteria was on that first stage, and I think what I foresee happening as we move into that September 4th date, communication coming out with rationale as to what was decided with data. Yes. There is a question in here about assessments. How will assessments be handled? It was specifically asking about sixth grade, but maybe Jay, Chip, talk about, what are assessments, maybe are common daily or class level assessments look like? And then Jay, maybe chime in about what are you hearing from the state on the state level assessments?
Do you want me to check, or are you going to chime in?
Chip,
I say either one of you. Chip, why don't you start?
Okay, so as far as classroom assessments, clearly this is some uncharted territory as far as that's concerned. But I was saying earlier today that we want to work with our teachers, students, and families. Clearly assessment is super important, and the integrity of those are important as well. But that can't stop us from trying to assess our kids. So we may have to look at some more authentic type assessments, which are a good opportunity and our reflection of our curriculum, along with some different ways to deliver those assessments, so we can monitor our students' progress and learning those essential standards that we're teaching. So each teacher will be kind of rolling out how they're going to make that happen. And clearly those are things that we're continuing to develop as well. But that is something that we'll have to do as we look to move forward in this remote learning process. And integrity is a piece of it. And, I think we'll be able to kind of tell if students aren't doing them with integrity, but, depending on that, how they do and so on and so forth. But it's more a matter of making that a priority to continue to work out ways to make that happen.
Thanks, Tony. Jamie, what's the latest from the state on our MSTEP or other high-flying middle school testing targets?
Yeah, so as far as any sort of state testing expectations, generally our MSTEP or PSAT at the 8th grade, that does not take place until the springtime, April, May. And so as far as, the fall is concerned, it's not something that middle school students will have to be worrying about at this time. We're all hoping that we're back into a full 5-day face-to-face by the time the springtime hits and those testing requirements roll around. So really the only fall testing requirements that we're still waiting on are specific to the high school for things like PSAT 8, 9, PSAT 10, and SAT.
Good, thank you. Question about if families are wanting to stay in full remote and even in stage B or C, strictly remote for the year or some duration, the answer is yes. And again, should have clarified that at the beginning. The Madawan remote learning program will be available the entire year. And it's, this question wasn't asked, but I'll talk about it briefly. It may come up. You may think about it later. We initially are asking for, a commitment of a marking period. And, I know we haven't got into it. We haven't experienced it. So there's, again, flexibility will be applied, but, we are asking families to try to make a marking period commitment if they're choosing full remote to give it a chance, just to limit the movement for the child and the reorganization that's got to happen on the school side. But bottom line is this: if we get into stage B and the hybrid isn't working and your child wants to go back to full remote, we will get them back to full remote. If they're in full remote and we're in stage C and I don't know, it's March, and they want to come back to the in-person segment, absolutely. That ties into another question, and I'll get it started, and then Chip or Jay jump in. When it talks about the curriculum being used between remote, or the instruction, the assignments and all that being used between remote and on-site, and will they be the same? So, my initial answer to that is we are using the same standards and the same content. Teachers are planning together, and we're looking to keep the continuity there as much as possible. But I cannot say with complete 100% guarantee that we can replicate an on-site program exactly the same in a remote model. But from a content and standard standpoint, we're using the same pieces. Jay or Chip, you might be able to, I don't know, make that more clear, but I maybe didn't do a good job explaining that, or talk a little bit more in detail about the differences and similarities between the content and curriculum between those two models.
No, I would agree with what you said. I mean, I certainly our goal is to have everybody of us, because that's when that's what works best for everyone. But clearly would agree with you that those learning standards and so on and so forth are still going to be an important part of both models. But having students in front of us is clearly something that's different than them being somewhere else. So that's where it is going to feel different. And that's just the nature of the way it is, regardless of what online program is used for anyone, is that it's going to have a different feel and a different approach in that respect. But in terms of what you said, as far as curriculum and that consistency, that will be there.
And I'd also add that questions have come up in previous meetings about I lost it. I apologize. This happened this morning too. Jay, if you had a comment, give me a second. It'll come back to me. Jay, I didn't know if you had anything to add about curriculum from a district level.
Obviously, the challenge of curriculum and implementing in a remote model is very different, as we said, versus the face-to-face. The content that we'll be providing, one of the things that I've kind of talked about is, the fact that at the end of the year we missed 2 months of time with students or more, 2.5 months. And so a lot of the discussions at the building levels, with teachers, is going to be talking about what were some of those skills that were not able to be addressed. And so as we move into, this startup and into, a remote model, we're looking at what were some of those things that we're going to have to build upon, and really honing a lot of the foundational skills that students are going to need in order to continue to make progress, in general curriculum as we move into, and hopefully soon, to a face-to-face model.
Right. Thank you for that. The comment I was going to make, will there, so when we talk about this movement back and forth, or kids in hybrid, face-to-face, full face-to-face, or remote, how will we be grouping students? And so let's field some questions here about class lists, rosters, course schedules, and I'll kick it off with, will there be classes of strictly remote only students? And the question, the answer to that is, at the elementary, yes, highly likely that we will have, let's say, 2 sections of first grade students that have said, we want remote the entire year. Okay, we've got 2 teachers ready to do that. We're going to set that up right at the beginning, and they're going to work through remote. It doesn't mean that if they change their mind, like we talked about, the child has to stay there. No, we're going to readjust that. That might be a change in teacher, though. But as we move into the middle school and the high school, that becomes a little more challenging. And Chip, I know we talked a little bit about this in the administrative meeting today. My takeaway from that is that we're not necessarily going to have middle school or high school teachers, for that matter, strictly remote only. Can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, that's correct. So it works a little bit different at the secondary level, given certification requirements and how the schedule is set up, and kids having specific teachers for specific subjects and so on and so forth. So it's going to be teachers kind of working in both environments, both, once we go to hybrid, in person and remotely, to help whatever environment the kids are in. If I could too, Randy, real quick, a couple times in regards to students in a hybrid piece. And again, I know tonight's focus is on remote learning, but this question came up a few times. So just real quick, we are working really hard on scheduling kids. It's like I said to you earlier, it's a definite web that we weave with this whole process, but we are working to put the kids according to households so that siblings will be in the same group. And we also spoke with our early and later elementary to do, so that we're working on an alphabet situation or by household given names and so on and so forth. So we are working super hard to make that happen for families so that their kids in their household are going to school on the same days to help out in that respect. That was a question that came up several times.
Yeah, you nailed that one. And then there was one, a couple questions right above that. There was a question about encore classes. They're 25 to 30 minutes in duration.
Yeah,
Are encore part of the 2 blocks anyways? Maybe clarify the encore.
Yeah, so each student has 2 encores per day. So they'll, as an example, if I'm a 6th grade student, I have my encores 6th and 7th hour. So they have different teachers for those classes. And those classes are going to be just a little bit shorter, again, for some scheduling purposes, but also for to help our students too get a little bit of a break from their screens throughout the course of the morning, because that's a lot of screen time all at one time. So we're trying to keep a balance in that respect too. So it's multiple reasons, but students have 2 encores per day with 2 different teachers. So it's not that they don't have one teacher for a block of time.
Yeah, excellent. And then several questions about schedules.
Oh yeah.
And just kind of your thoughts on when you anticipate the schedules getting pushed out.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm encouraging parents, and I'm going to try to send something out by the end of the week, to just log into PowerSchool first and foremost. Just make sure that account is active and accessible to you. Also checking through your demographic information and making sure addresses and phone numbers and emails and contact information is updated. And then next week, we'll push out through School Messenger when schedules will be available. But at some point next week, I wouldn't count on Monday or Tuesday, but mid to later week, we're going to announce to folks that the schedules are live for everyone. And regardless of the year, at the middle school level, we are tweaking and changing schedules to make them fit. And we try to release them when we feel most confident that they're accurate, because we're trying to minimize the changes as much as possible. And I will say that changing schedules is not always possible given a lot of factors. So I don't want to promise anybody that a lot of changes can occur. Because there's just so many things, once again, that we have to consider and think about. But it's our hope to have those released by that mid to later week next week. And again, we'll push out a School Messenger, but I want to make sure that everyone's PowerSchool is active. And then we'll be just instructing parents, hey, you can jump on. But if you get on PowerSchool right now to check your account, you're going to see last year's information because we haven't rolled over to the 2021 year. So I don't want you to feel like you're getting a bad information or whatever. It's just we haven't rolled over. I just want to encourage people to access those accounts, make sure they're active and working.
And if there's a question about if there are challenges logging into PowerSchool, username, password, we do have the tech guru online with us right now. Is that a question to principals' offices, or is that a question to tech?
That question goes to, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my phone because I have the address here. If we keep talking, I'll find it. But
no, okay. Yeah, keep scrolling.
Yeah.
Keep looking for that. I just want to make sure now that we've talked about PowerSchool that we maybe drop that contact in the chat thread, Chip, and about who they may talk to.
Oh, right here. Got it. I got to hold it far away from my eyes here, apparently. Let's see. Put it in the chat, you said, Randy?
Yeah. Is it an email?
Yep. It's portal support.
Okay, thank you for doing that. And you know what, we'll probably want to add that to the infograph as well. All right, let's keep working through some questions. Chip's working on that. We'll put Mr. Larner in the hot seat. He does support and oversee special education. There's quite a few questions here on special services. How is virtual learning being supported for children that require more support in a specific subject? Chip, you may want to tag team on that, but we talked briefly about some of the thoughts here out of the special ed program. Jay, anything to add specifically to that question?
So what we're currently doing within the special education department is our caseload managers are reaching out to families. They're going to be touching base over the week leading up to school and on into the first week of school, just to talk a little bit about what programming and services will look like. We're asking for a little bit of time and latitude to transition to some face-to-face supports, and not just for special education students, but also for intervention programs. I think that question was brought up as well as just in general on what are we doing to support students, and then specifically in the afternoon. Was kind of looking at the schedule. And so, that's something that we're going to be transitioning to, working directly with families to identify the individual needs of students and determine what additional supports are going to be needed. Directly with teachers, our itinerant providers for things like speech, social work, things of that nature. So we're building that into the school day. So that, not just intervention supports, but also extension opportunities are available to connect with teachers towards the afternoon.
Good. Some questions on technology with both synchronous learning. Do we need to be prepared to have devices available for simultaneous instruction for our children? So I'm assuming here that this is multiple children in the house at various grade levels. And the answer is yes. Knowing that the elementary, middle school, and high school all are looking at the live instructional components in the morning, I would say yes. There needs to be the ability to connect simultaneously. And again, I would just remind folks that are online here that to get the request in, make your need known for devices and hotspots. There was another question about how do we know if our request, I'm assuming on the survey or maybe even emails for devices went through. Great question. I know that if you're on the survey, it'll give you a note at the end, your response has been recorded. If you see that note, that was logged in the survey. And what the tech department is doing now, and I'm sure if I misspeak, our tech director will chime in probably. As soon as that survey went out, I'm pretty sure they started cataloging and setting up responses to families that were putting those requests in. If you did file a request and you have not been contacted yet, I would just say give it another day or two. I would also say if you're wanting a direct feedback on that survey, use the email that was in that infograph. I'll put that back up on the screen quickly. This information will be coming out to families though this week. I'm going to share a screen. Sorry about that. This email right here, support@madawanschools.org. That will go right to tech, and you could check in with that through that pathway. Let's see. Oh, lots of questions about extracurricular and athletics. As far as we know, MHSAA is green light go for high school athletics. I mean, there are restrictions and guidelines to follow for safety and all of that, but I have not heard any change in that. And I would also say that we are planning on moving ahead with middle school athletics. I haven't, Chip, we haven't talked about this in a couple days, but I haven't heard any news from the middle school circuit. It sounds like the majority of schools are still online for middle school sports. I mean, I guess the only challenge would be if conference teams or middle school teams start shutting down athletics, we might run out of teams to play. Over the weekend, I mean, there is a little bit of consternation out there in the athletic world. The Big Ten did pull the plug and postpone, football. But what we're hearing is MHSAA is pretty steadfast in moving forward, and it probably would take, an executive order of some sort to alter that course now. Jay, any other up-to-date information from your realm that you're hearing on athletics?
Nothing new. I know that the executive director had a podcast this afternoon. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but my understanding is that the plan for athletics is to continue, as scheduled, as long as it falls within the executive order guidelines. So it's really being put back on the schools to figure out how we're going to make athletic programs work.
Right. And the question right now, I think the big piece is that these are outdoor sports. Volleyball is a hold because the gymnasiums have not been opened up per executive order.
Yeah.
I do believe swimming is on hold because of the pool issue. And what I mean by that is our home pool is closed. That is that Western's pool? Okay, so volleyball, pool, that's the caveat here. It could be a different ball game when we get to winter sports inside. So right now, I think that's some latitude because we're outside for most of these events and so forth. There was some speculation out there. These are probably rumors. I don't know what to believe and what not to believe when we hear chatter about Lansing and decisions. There was chatter that the gymnasium usage was going to get revised and we'd be able to use that for practices. Haven't seen anything on that, or on the movement of the pool usage. So there was a question about non-athletic kinds of activities, clubs, activities. Are these going to be available in phase 4 and 5? I believe in the overview document in phase 4. This is really stretching my memory right now. Jay, if you've got that with the Wildcat head on the front that we sent out last week, I believe in that overview document in phase 4 that non-athletic indoor clubs and all of that is suspended if it's indoors. I don't want to misspeak here with everybody on the line, but I do know in the overview document we did address that. But I believe that's phase 4. So into a phase 5, to that point of the question, we're having a lot of those required pieces in phase 4 loosened to strongly recommended or downgraded to just recommended. Jay, are you have that up by chance?
Yeah, I pulled it up. I'm trying to find it.
So you're going to scroll. It's going to be under the middle school section. I believe there's a note in there about non-athletic activities.
Go ahead and keep answering questions.
We'll keep going. We're going to keep going. We'll come back to that question. We want to get you accurate information on that. Our teacher is going to be able to utilize Zoom breakout rooms. Oh, awesome question. Yes, Zoom does have a breakout room set feature. However, we are not utilizing Zoom. We are utilizing Google Classroom. And so Google Classroom does not have a built-in breakout room session. The workaround there, a little bit clunky, but it would be basically running a parallel room and then dropping that access link into a chat thread with students, or a parapro taking, running that parallel meeting. Students would leave one, maybe leave a window open, leave that meeting, jump into the parallel meeting. A few extra steps, but I think the end result is very similar. But we are having continuity in the platform, and that was some of the feedback we received in the spring, to try to minimize platforms and apps and the way that we're communicating, just to lessen the burden on parents on managing multiple platforms. Great question, though.
Hey, Randy,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry to answer the so with the clubs and activities for middle school sports, we'll follow the guidelines and protocols from the MHSAA. All other clubs and activities will be virtual only.
You're in phase 4?
Correct.
Okay. And what I would add is, under a phase 5, we'd have to review that situation, but I feel very fairly confident that we would be able to revisit the club non-athletic piece, especially if we're approaching winter and whatnot. We'd have to review that, but our hope would be that we'd be able to relax that and allow some of those to take place, or get creative on how we're maybe social distancing in there if they are inside, and so forth. But thank you for asking that. A good question. Some questions on communication. Can you please send out the summaries for all schools? Yes, we will send out the summaries for all schools. So after the high school meeting tomorrow, you'll get a school messenger, probably Friday morning, that will have the document that you're seeing tonight, and then the summary pages for elementary, middle school, and high school. And then most likely on Monday will be what we're calling granular documents. So by building, this is a much more detailed document just for middle school remote, just for elementary or early and later remote, just for high school. The communication that you'll receive will be from central office. It will have links to all of those, and you will probably most likely be receiving an independent communication from each individual building. And we know that families have been inundated with surveys and information, but we really want to err on the side of over communicating right now. This information will also direct you to a page on the website, Return to Learning page, that will be housing all of these documents, because I know they're adding up and the communications are adding up, and we want to have that nice and tidy and organized for folks online. Other questions about communication? Let's see here. Apologize for reading this here while you're waiting. Okay, so a lot questions on schedule. We've already talked about when that's coming out.
Randy, while you're reading through the
questions, go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, there was a couple questions in there about printing documents. I'm talking to teachers also about really doing our very best, or really kind of eliminating that need to print things, because we do understand that printing is not going to be accessible to all of our families.
Right.
And that's another added expense, and so on and so forth. So, whatever work is being completed, that we need to find ways for that to be accessed online and answered and submitted online, because printing is not going to be available to everyone. So we'll keep working as well.
Chip, good answer, and thanks for bringing that up, because there were questions earlier, I think this morning, and actually in elementary, and we'll probably have them in high school, about packets.
Right.
I know in the spring, there many schools provided the supplemental packets, or they were available for pickup or distribution. as a leadership team, we are working through that. To your point about printing and not wanting to burden parents with having to print out items, we do want to have as much as possible on remote and fill in remote, digitally. But, I'll say now that if there is a hardship out there and we need to get printed materials to you as a family, we're going to work with you to do that. And so we're still kind of working out the process there. Question about setting up Power School. I'm not sure if this is maybe a newer one. If you have access to the chat line right now, there was an email that was dropped into the chat thread on how to contact support, Power School support. If you could start there, and I would just add, if you are having trouble, you're not getting a response, please reach back out. I'd say start with your building principal, which would be this guy right here online, Mr. Schumann, and he's going to be happy to help you get Power School set up. Great question about, is there going to be a conflict between students and teachers each day once stage B and C happen? And I'm reading that as this is going back to the hybrid and what we talked about. If you have cohorts, so if you have a group A on Monday and Tuesday coming in, half the class, the other half is remote at home, who's instructing those kids? I think that's what this question is asking, the conflict of instruction. And that's what we're wrestling with. If we cohort and do two separate groups in the student body, most likely the majority of the offsite will be asynchronous. And that's this is what we're struggling with right now and what we're working through. And so if it is cohorting, we've got to get creative and be sensitive to that very question. If all kids are coming back in a hybrid several days a week, the question might become, okay, well, everybody's there getting instruction when they're on site. And then when they're off site, the teacher has no kids at school, they're doing remote. Why would we do that? Why don't we just come back full time? And this, I don't think this question was asked, but let me just address that. Absolutely rational question. The idea on the hybrid is more about acclimation, having kids come in a graduated process to get used to being on campus, being back on campus after what could be 6, 7, 8 months out of the classroom, getting used to the procedures that are in the building, the safety protocols, the mask wearing. And so this is really more about acclimation moving into that full mode in stage C. But that question is kind of getting at the heart of, what we're struggling with right now. And obviously we welcome your feedback on that. If you've got thoughts or ideas about, questions, concerns on that hybrid model, I know many have been posted here tonight, but keep those questions coming. I hope I'm addressing that question appropriately. That's what I think it meant there and what it was.
A couple other questions about the social emotional needs of students.
Yes.
Clearly, that's something that that's a big part of our middle school under the best circumstances is meeting the social emotional needs of our students. And this is a tough time, or it's a kind of a roller coaster ride of time in their life, and we're very sensitive to that. We do have 2 counselors on staff, Kristen Kay and Nikki Douglas, who I'm going to be working with to continue to monitor and provide perhaps some other creative supports for kids that need additional social emotional needs. And that's also something I'm going to be spending a lot of time speaking to our staff as a whole about is, we want to have the best, obviously, learning experience that we can, but we want to do it with grace, and be understanding. We have a theme in our building that we say everyone has a story. And so we want to be as sensitive as we can be to everyone's story, given that there's 900, so we'll work hard to reach all those needs, but we want to make sure that we're listening to everyone's story and do the best we can and engage our counselors and our teachers and support staff to help out with those things. And I always tell everybody, I didn't have a chance to do this presentation this year because of the situation we're in. And I just would say that, we're not perfect by any means, but we really strive hard to do a really good job. So we may not be perfect, but we strive to do so. And so we're going to really try hard to keep connecting with our kids and keeping them engaged as much as possible, which an added piece to that, parents are going to find that we are going to be taking attendance during the remote learning time. And that's kind of a safety check also. It's not only that we want to make sure kids are engaged, but we want to make sure that they're present and that they're safe and so on and so forth. So we're asking that our teachers take attendance each hour and make sure that kids are there and actively engaged. We're going to keep our robocall system going, that if students aren't in class, that you may be getting a phone call, that they were absent for a class or their classes or whatever, just again as a safety piece. And then we'll be looking into why. So if you know that your students are going to be gone, we're going to ask that parents call in, and just like you would on any other day, they have appointments, so they won't be in classes, so that we know we can mark that as an excused and you won't get that call. But if you do, it's not because we're trying to bother you. It's because we're just trying to make sure everybody is safe and as engaged as we possibly can.
Yeah. Good, Chip. Thank you for that. Jay, did I cut you off? No. Okay.
But there was a question in here, we touched on in the curricular area. Great question in here about what are strategies and practices that are being implemented in curriculum that demonstrate working efforts in the school community with anti-racism, biases, Black Lives Matter, special needs, cultural competency, and white privilege. I wanted to just talk about that really quick. We are working with our diversity and inclusion director and looking at some professional development for all of our staff on inclusive curriculum and instruction, really working with teachers on implementing practices that are going to provide for an inclusive classroom. We also have some implicit bias training that we're planning on taking our administrative team to, coming in district, that we have planned for October. So a little bit later in the year, but just wanted to touch on that it's on the district and making a part of our improvement plan. So.
Thank you, Jay, for that. Couple questions, and I am eyeballing the clock here. We're almost about 15 over. We were targeting an hour and 15 minutes. The majority of y'all are still hanging with us. We're at about 120 participants. We will look to kind of bring this home in the next couple minutes. Chip and Jay, if you could scan those questions. I do have a couple of responses on technology. When it talks about cameras being on, and I would say we're not going. I mean, obviously, when the camera is on, you can see each other. There's engagement, etc. But clearly, we're having engagement, more through the audio link. I would, we haven't necessarily talked about this administratively. My screen locked up over here. Did you guys lose me?
No, we're still here.
Okay, thanks. So we're not going to major on the minors there. And I think if a student is logged in and that audio is going and they're hearing and talking, the video portion could be, something that gets decided, or, if there's not a comfort there, obviously, that's something we want to work with folks on. Our devices that are getting handed out are all filtered, they're trackable, they're monitored. The email, Google applications, all of those applications that are on our devices are set up to be monitored and are constantly looking for keywords that are questionable. And so we do have applications there that would assist with that. There was a question about backgrounds, and I'm thinking that's a question about the backspace here and what's happening in the background. I mean, we've all seen YouTube clips maybe of Zoom meetings that have or stuff's happening in the background, and people don't know that there's a meeting happening. I mean, we try to recommend positioning yourself against a blank wall. I've got this very attractive gray wall behind me, and I'm not sure if that's what the question is getting to, or if it's virtual backgrounds. I know that we can, on a Zoom meeting, we have a lot of control over what participants can and cannot do. And I believe that's the same for the Google Classroom. The other thing that we like about Google Classroom is that it requires signing in. And kids have an account, an email account. We know who is there. And that was one of the challenges early on with Zoom. In most districts in the spring, and then I think Zoom kind of altered a lot of the controls there. But so there are safety pieces that are put in place there. So let me jump back to Chip or Jay, if you had a chance to scan through those questions. Again, as a reminder, we will be publishing answers to these questions in a document in the next few days. But anything out there, Chip, Jay, that you're seeing that you wanna capture quickly?
I would just say a good tip came our way that when it is time to view student schedules through PowerSchool, it's important to note that you'll want to use the web browser to access PowerSchool and look at their schedule rather than the PowerSchool app. It won't show you on the PowerSchool app, so you need to use the web browser version of that. And just to piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying, as far as students and having their cameras off and so on and so forth, we did have a little bit of discussion about that. Again, it's really kind of a case by case, and showing that grace. What we really want to make sure is that students are engaged, but we're also understanding at the middle school level that kids are pretty self-conscious about themselves, and so putting their face out there in a classroom is a different look than having a screen full of faces that are in a virtual class. So really working hard with staff to be understanding of our students' needs developmentally at the middle school level, and what that looks like. So, we want to be real careful with that. But again, our major priority is engagement. As far as the backgrounds, we're probably going to get a little bit particular about that because we don't want that to be a distraction to learning. And we know that our middle school kids can get distracted from time to time within their learning. And so we want to be real conscious of that also. So just want to have a really good learning environment for kids. So and take their social, emotional, and developmental needs into account as we're doing that.
Right. And I would add, Tony might know the answer to this. I believe we might have controls on some of these pieces in the Google Meet platform through Google Classroom. And I think, again, we're going to be very sensitive and conscious to safety, security, activity, behavior online. And I like that phrase, Chip, about extending a little grace here and flexibility in these situations. So yeah, thanks, Chip, for that. Jay, anything outstanding there that you're seeing, question-wise?
Nothing we haven't really fully addressed. I guess there was one that just came in right at the tail end here, so I might as well answer that one. That is outside of my wheelhouse. Are student accounts monitored if used on a non-school device? So I mean, obviously, if it was through Google Classroom that is set up as our platform, we would be able to monitor that. But I'm assuming this is, our ability to be able to monitor a student's personal device outside of the platforms that we're navigating through instruction.
Right.
Jump in, feel free.
You're 100% correct, Jay. We cannot monitor a student's personal device, but if they're logging into Gmail or using a Google app of some sort, we would be able to monitor it then.
Right. They would be signing in to the Madawan Gmail account or platform. Correct?
Correct.
Right. So it's some kids are may have their own personal Gmail. That's not what we're talking about. This is strictly the Madawan platform on a personal device can be monitored though.
Right. So if it's a personal device and a personal application, we don't really have a way to do that. I would suggest this is the time, even for our sixth grade parents that are coming in, that kids are really starting to get those devices and have more access to them. And so even in our springtime presentation, I use the phrase communicate about their communications. So in other words, stay connected to your kids and keep having conversations and monitoring, what they're a part of, and just having those, digital citizenship conversations to make sure that kids are really kicking off those experiences in a real positive way. We know that they can turn to the negative side, and we don't want that to happen. But we as a school, really, we don't have the application, but not only that, we don't have really the rights to monitor everybody's personal devices unless it's, like you're saying, in a Google platform in that framework. So just communicate about their communication, stay connected.
Yeah. Good questions. Good feedback. So at this point, I want to begin to kind of head into the home stretch, and we do appreciate parents, community members hanging with us. I know we're a little bit over here, but man, great questions and feedback, and hopefully you found this is beneficial tonight. Chip, any parting thoughts, closing comments? Jay, the same for you next, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no, all I would say is, thank you for your participation. Also, thank you for your patience and grace. Also, I am just so sorry that this is the way the conversation we're having to have, because clearly we would like to be doing what we do traditionally and so on and so forth. And so we want to make sure everybody's safe and everybody's taken care of. And at the middle school level, we'll just work as hard as we can to do a good job. As I said, we're not perfect, but we're going to strive for it. And we're just going to work really hard and really dig in and try to, and we're going to quality experience we can. But I've been in this community a long time, and I know just how supportive everybody is, and that's why I brought my family here. So I really appreciate that, and again, thank you for the opportunity to educate your kids. And we will get through this. We'll be stronger as a result of it, and we'll be better as a result of it. But first and foremost, it's social, emotional, and personal needs, so that learning is possible, and then we're going to give a good learning experience. So thank you for that, and Randy, thank you for the opportunity to speak to that.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for being here tonight. Jay, parting comment?
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that Chip had shared, and just thank everybody for the participation tonight. Lots of great questions, that really are going to help us to be thinking, much more deeply about, the things that we need to be taking into consideration as we continue to unfold the plan and develop it and mold it, so that we're providing the best education that we possibly can in kind of the environment that we're in. So we greatly appreciate everyone's time tonight, and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Absolutely. And just a few parting reminders. Look for upcoming communication this Friday through School Messenger. We will be getting out some additional information on the remote return to learning plan. Also, at the first part of this coming week, much more detail coming out on the individual building plans as well. And then generally speaking, toward the end of this next week, you're going to be getting course listings, class lists, at the latest Friday, but I know schools are working to get those together, by Thursday, if not beating that deadline. But on behalf of the administration, the Board of Education, I would like to thank everybody for their time tonight, and we wish you a peaceful evening and a good finish to the week. And we just appreciate you being here. So with that, I know these the virtual meetings always end abruptly when the tech guy ends it. So have a good evening. Stay safe. We'll be in communication soon. If it can't wait, reach out to one of us, a building administrator, and we're going to do our best to get you information. But thanks for the great evening, and take care. We'll turn it over to the host, our tech director. So good night, everybody.